Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, today is Monday. This is the last session for this course. Let me say a couple of things about the course in general. When I developed this course, I wanted us to reflect on thought in general, but particularly on African thought, African philosophy. We have always assumed that philosophy actually began in Greece, which was the 6th century. We also know that Homo sapiens started thinking from the day we discovered them and they grew up around 60,000 years ago. So we know there was that philosophical thought in Greece. There were also thoughts before that. And a lot of that we still don't know. A few of them that we know, we try to cover them, particularly from ancient Egypt, Kemet. There are two other people in African thought that I want to share with you before I move into the actual program for today. Today we are going to look at African thought in the diaspora. You recall I said Africa is divided into 5+1 regions: the North, the South, the East, the West, and Central. The 6th region is Africans in the diaspora. It is estimated there are between 3 to 400 million Africans in the diaspora all over the world. There's still so much we don't know about those people, where they travel to, where they are. But I do want to add two more. I was looking for a woman thinker, because the history of philosophy is the history of neglect of women thinkers. It's generally all men. There are assumptions women don't think. They believe then, and some of them still believe that now. So I started conducting more and more research to see whether I can find some more. I found one that I want to share with you. There are another African thinker of contemporary thought, because all I showed you last week, they were all dead. So I was looking for one who's still alive, who's addressing contemporary issues, and I want to share that with you also. There's the Amin there. We revised it to make sure that the name is written there. I tried to spell it out last week, but I'm not sure with all my triple accents you understood how I was spelling it, but that's what it is. That's the supreme power of God. So with that, we will try to move forward, see what we can do. Okay, where's my, hello dear. No, it's not moving. Okay, let me go now. We talked about all of this last week, but I want to talk about this one, but that's not the one I want right now. I want the lady first. Come on, I think I saw it. Yeah, that's it. Hypatia. Hypatia. It's called Hypatia of Alexandria, because we know Alexandria is in Egypt. Great thinker. Look at the time she lived. Hypatia was born into an intellectual family. Her father, Theon, was a great philosopher and a mathematician. And he told his daughter, read everything you can, do some critical thinking, and be whatever you want to be. That's what she did. She became a great mathematician, also studied chemistry, and she became a professor at Alexandria University. At this period of history, you know what was going on in the world with reference to religion. This is one of the greatest stories about the impact of religion. Alexandria, most part of that old world at that time were called pagans. Paganism. Christians moved into Alexandria and wanted to make sure that they wiped out paganism. And this lady was lecturing at the university, walking home one day. A mob of Christians got her, captured her, took her into the church. I hate to describe it. She was put naked and scratched all of her body and told her to kiss the cross and repent, and she'll be forgiven. She believed, as a great mathematician, she saw spirituality in mathematics. That's what she wanted to teach. She was so impactful in the community that the governor of the city refused to attend church. That was a low blow. And the Christians got together. Actually, I hate to use the word, but it's a very familiar term. She was lynched. Killed, not only killed, she was burnt. And the bishop came later on and said, that's not enough. I want the entire university put fire in it. Was burned down. That is a pathetic story of a great thinker that we have almost forgotten. Not too much we know about Hypatia. But from all I can find, she was a great thinker of her time, way ahead of her time. And she passed. The other African thinker that I want to share with you is more contemporary. I was looking, all these people are dead. I was looking for somebody who's a contemporary thinker that has impact on contemporary issues of Africa. PLO Lumumba. That's actually Patrick Leon Senti Lumumba. He's not Lumumba of the old Congo, but this is his name. Lumumba grew up as a Muslim in Kenya. He studied law, has a bachelor's degree in law from University of Nairobi, which was a British university, and finished his master's degree in law in Kenya. Later on, he went and received his PhD at University of Kent in Belgium. His wife is also a lawyer. Very articulate. They have a law firm, still in Kenya. At one time, he served as anti-corruption commissioner for Kenya. I wanted to look for someone who is now thinking about one of the greatest problems facing Africa. In fact, there is global corruption, even including the United States. But the corruption in Africa is almost at an epidemic stage. As an anti-corruption commissioner, he sued and attacked everyone they can find who was stealing money from Kenya and sending the money to Swiss Bank, England, US, building homes, and Kenyans are very poor. As we speak today, Kenya's youth has an unemployment of more than 64%. And there's money. If you have followed the news recently, we found out that Kenya's president came to visit US. He was in the White House. They have sent soldiers to go and fight in Haiti. Very well paid. The poverty in Kenya and the starvation in Kenya because of weather and the rest of them is very painful. This man had traveled almost everywhere in Africa to talk about corruption. If you Google, you find some of his YouTube. In Nigeria, he was talking about how do we get rid of corruption. Here is what I really want you to understand. Corruption does not come only from the leaders, he said. Corruption comes as it was based upon the choices of the African people. He said, your choices determine who's going to govern you. And he said, they have been focused on those who are leaders. Who is focusing on the followers? He said, you cannot solve the problem of corruption by only focusing on the leaders. That you all know they are corrupt. In fact, he goes all the way back to the New Testament when he refers to Barabbas and Jesus. Barabbas was a criminal. Everybody knew that. Killed people, was in prison. But when the time came to choose between Jesus and Barabbas, Pontius Pilate, what did he say? The people said, let's keep Barabbas. Barabbas is one of us. What happened to Jesus? You know the rest of the story. Jesus was crucified. And he said, people thought Barabbas, once he's free, he will become an effective, normal leader. No. Barabbas went back to do what he knew best. Criminal. He said, that's what this is the parallel we're trying to draw here. He said, African leaders are like that. He said, you Africans who elect these people know they are corrupt. But after you elect them, you expected them to change. See, Barabbas never changed. Don't expect them to change. So his focus now is how do we deal with the followers who are electing these corrupt leaders? Very, very thoughtful. It's very provocative. I'm actually very afraid. Now, he has left that job now, anti-lynching, for his own life. He's now a professor at law school in Nairobi. So you may want to Google him. He's a young scholar. He's writing. His wife is a lawyer. I just pray that he stays on the case. This is now the elephant in the room when it comes to Africa, corruption. Africa is rich, richest continent in the world, and yet the poorest continent in the world. So this is what's going on. I wanted to share that with you before I move to the topic of today. Okay. You have a question? Okay. No. No, this is very, very different. PLO. People say it's PLO in Israel. No, this is full name is really Patrick. Then he has African name Leon. Yeah. He's a young scholar who went to law school in Nairobi. Yeah, he's contemporary, very young. What I want to do now is to look at Africa in the diaspora. Let me make one or two remarks before I start talking about that. There are three types of Africans in the diaspora. They have been historically as a product of migration. There were Africans who migrated in the rest of the world before the transatlantic slave trade and the trans-Saharan slave trade. We don't know too much about them, but archaeologists, anthropologists, historians are digging into those people. But we do know there was migration before the slave trade. The second wave of migration is the transatlantic slave trade and trans-Saharan slave trade. We call this forced migration. These were the people who were enslaved in the New World and even beyond. This second wave of migration, in most of our studies, we limit them to the transatlantic slave trade. What I want to share with you today is that the transatlantic slave trade was bad. Probably took about 4,400 years. It's a product of 16th century, actually, very recent. But there was another slave trade that actually started in the 7th century, the Arab slave trade that became transatlantic slave trade, not only in the Sahara, but all over the world. For example, by 7th century, there were a lot of Arabs that came to East Africa, particularly Kenya and the rest of them. They were engaged in that trade, sending people, buying them to Asia and all that part of the world. Very much productive. In fact, they were selling slaves to people in Sudan and Nubia then to take care of their debt. And yet, we don't seem to remember Zanzibar. That was an island, it's now part of Tanzania, of slaves. There's no much focus on that. So I just wanted to make sure that we're not only talking about Africa in the diaspora as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. There was also the Arab slave trade, which began centuries. The transatlantic is only 16th century, but I'm talking about 7th century, even before the birth of Muslim as a religion. So it is very, very deep. It was a very brutal slave trade also. So all of these are the people we are looking at now in the new world, in the rest of the world, other than the continent. This is what we call the 6th region of Africa, Africans in the diaspora. And you have to view them in their own context, in the environment in which they came up. That's what philosophers do. They think about their immediate environment and the universe and the relationship between people. So I want to begin that by looking at this lady was one of those that came in that second group of migration, forced migration. Phyllis Whitney is known as the first great writer in the diaspora. She was a little girl when she was captured from West Africa. I'm not sure exactly where, but she was captured as a slave and sold into some rich folks merchants in Boston area. The man who bought her actually bought her to work with his wife as a servant or as a slave. His wife really loved that little girl. And so she has a great advantage to learn even how to read and how to write. There are some, there's speculation whether they even like each other. They traveled everywhere to Europe and came back. Phyllis Whitney is regarded as the first writer with his first publication in New World in 1773. And what is the title of his poem? Let me see what I can find here real quick. Come on, Phyllis. It's a poem of many subjects. And those subjects included religion and morality. It was very, very popular when it was published. It's still one of the major original publications that you can find. And her thoughts about morality were very, very deep. Of course, she was writing from her own experiences and never had any child. And somehow she, especially the baby that died, and she also passed very early in her life. You can see she didn't live for a long time at all. That was the story of a lot of people read about her in the literature. People who specialize in English, they love to read about Phyllis Whitney, an account of her living here in Europe and coming back, and how she was treated by the madame of the house, and very, very reflective in terms of the poem of several subjects, including religion and philosophy. Keep on wondering, everybody's always writing about religion. Is religion a problem or a blessing? Well, you think about that, I don't know. So that is the story of Felix Whitley. So I'm going to move now to other thinkers of the diaspora. Because of lack of time, I'm going to just highlight some of their contributions. It's always good to understand their background because they are writing in that context. That's the biography. I'm not sure whether I can do all of that today, but at least to talk to you about their great contributions or greatest contributions into the school of thought, into philosophy. Richard Allen, you probably have read about him. It's all about religion also. As a product of the problem right here in the US, when people were enslaved, were not allowed, even when it became free, to attend the same church and worship with white people. And so by 1816, he thought about it was time to develop a black church. So Richard Allen was the founder of the first African Methodist Episcopal. You have to remember now, almost everything at that time was always African. You hear the word African, they say, we're African people. We were enslaved Africans. You will find that to be true in almost all institutions, particularly from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, the rest of them, it's always African first. So it wasn't surprising to call it African Methodist Episcopal. The Methodist Church will not allow them to come and worship in the church. I don't know the thinking there. I've been doing a lot of work about the Wesleyan Methodists. Actually came originally from England. I still don't have the answer about thinking. The same way I don't have the answer where black people have a separate cemetery, whether they were going, when they are buried, going to black cemetery, black heaven, or black hell. I'm trying to understand that. I spent some time in Konopi to look at those two cemeteries. They are there, one black, one white. And now they are building houses on a lot of those black cemeteries now, condos, and make money and that kind of stuff. Maybe I will never understand that. I see. So that was the life of it became the anvil on which the black spirituality was built in America. I won't say the rest of the world, but the part of the diaspora that we are talking about. Okay. I'm going to move this fastly. I'm sure you have read about Frederick Douglass. Somebody thought he was still alive, but he was not alive. Frederick Douglass died many years ago. Former president thought he was alive. Frederick Douglass was an abolitionist. Born in slavery from Maryland. And long story, he escaped. Became a warrior, an abolitionist. How do I characterize Frederick Douglass? He was a pioneer in his time in thinking about the freedom of black people. In fact, he has very, very close connection with Abraham Lincoln. He was Abraham Lincoln's friend, also his worst critic. They met, they talked, even before the Emancipation Proclamation. He urged him, we got to set these people free. He points at the Constitution. We talk about all men were created equal. They have certain inalienable rights and so on and so forth. How can you have that? Are you having maintained the institution of slavery? He called that hypocrisy. He really appealed to Lincoln. And so the 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment can be attributed to his work as an abolitionist. He traveled everywhere to UK to raise money. He encouraged people, recruited abolitionists that helped him. Well, he's been criticized, yes. He married twice. First wife was a black woman. Second was a white woman. Never had any child with the second wife. So people say that, say, how come you see all of this? You still married a white woman. That was not his problem. His problem was equal justice and respect for human dignity. It doesn't matter what color it was. The best way to read about Frederick Douglass is to look at Life and Time of Frederick Douglass. You will see more in it. He also wrote his own narrative of Frederick Douglass. He established Charge d'Affaires in Haiti. He became the U.S. first ambassador in Haiti. This is a connection with the diaspora. Frederick Douglass, one thing I like about him is a quote of mine that I take from him. He said, you can do everything you want to do. He said, remember, there is no progress without struggle. I always keep that in my head all the time. Have you ever seen any progress without moving an inch? There's always some struggle. People don't want to change, just part of human nature. He says, so with that in mind, he continues to move forward. As a matter of fact, there is a historical site on Frederick Douglass' home in Washington, D.C. If you ever go to Washington, D.C., try to visit it. It's the original home on the hill. It's there. It's fantastic. All right, let's move forward. Aha. Aldo Bennett Wells. Aldo B. Wells. I can relate to her a little bit, but not quite. I wasn't born then. She was born into slavery. We are not sure whether she was actually a slave, but she was born into slavery in Holly Springs, Mississippi. I said that because I taught at Ross College in Holly Springs, Mississippi. So I know the story of Mississippi for a little while. She was one of the, what I call notable graduates from Ross College, R-O-U-S-T, Holly Springs. That's where she finished her degree. She was born into a family of 8 children. It was the 8th one. The father was poor, mother house worker. Unfortunately, the epidemic of 1878 killed her parents and one of her siblings in Holly Springs. So she became the head of the family. She got a teaching job. I moved out of Holly Springs into Memphis, Tennessee. Still about 40 miles, 1 hour drive to Memphis, Tennessee. To illustrate her capacity to resist and her dedication to justice, she focused on lynching issues. Lynching. One time she was traveling by train from Holly Springs going to Ohio. She sat on the side where white people sat. She was told she had to get out of there. They sent somebody to remove her, and she put her teeth on the person's arm, and the man fell down. So they sent 2 other men, white men, so they threw her out of the train. And she really suffered. But she survived and she went back. She decided to write as a journalist. And she was writing about what she calls the horrors of the South. In fact, that was the title of his writing. She has a press. I don't know if you recall, there's a part of Memphis, Tennessee that was very rich, occupied by black people. Beale Street or Beale Avenue, B-E-A-L-E. There's a church there also. A part of our operation was the part of the church, journalism. publication. Well, there was a bigger conflict than that. The people in Beale Street Avenue, they developed their own grocery stores. They were very successful capitalists. And the white business people, they got mad because they were taking business from them. And the mob of white people went and burned the place down, just like they did in Tulsa. The first thing they burned down was her press, a newspaper, because she was writing prolifically. Then she went to go and teach for a little while to raise her siblings. She actually practically raised her siblings. The rest of her life was dedicated into exposing what they call the horrors of the South. She wrote books, materials, everything about how they were lynching people. Her 3 good friends were lynched, 3 black men, for doing almost anything. So that is the story of Ida Well. She is very famous at Ross College area, a lot of awards. In fact, she did receive, I think it was, no, she received a Pulitzer Prize. I think that happened after she died. It was awarded to her as a prolific writer. She was a very thoughtful woman from the very, very deep South, Mississippi. Who is this? I think I talked about Aggrey last week. Just to sum up, Aggrey grew up in the Gold Coast, came to America in 1898 at a very tumultuous period in the history of North Carolina. He was sent by this AME, Zion Black Church, to study at Livingstone College in Salisbury, North Carolina. I was on that campus. He got 2 or 3 degrees from there. He went to the Hood Seminary and got a Doctor of Divinity from the Hood Seminary and pursued a PhD at Columbia University. He was married to young lady Roseburg from Virginia, black lady, and they have 4 children. She was a pioneer in the education of black people in Africa. She did just stay here. She was between Africa. When I was preparing this, I didn't know where to put him. Put him under diaspora or put him under Africa. She was from the Gold Coast. She has this philosophy that you must educate all our women. I call him one of the first male feminists in Africa. Co-educational school that he established in the Gold Coast. It's called the Achimota College. I've seen it, I've been there. He said, if you educate a man, you educate an individual, which is fine. But if you educate a woman, you educate a family and a nation. So he promoted that even down to the United States. He traveled almost everywhere. In Canada, a lot of experiences he went through in Canada with discrimination, South Africa, the rest of them. He also has a theory about what he called racial harmony. He said, you don't have to be black. You don't have to be black because you're not black, and vice versa. But we can live as God's children harmoniously. And he uses this thing he put together. If you play music in piano with a black keyboard, you get very nice music. If you play with white keyboard, you get another nice music. But if you play with both of them, you have the best melody. This is the way he wanted to talk about integration. So he was a great administrator at Livingston College, his alma mater. A lot of things are named after him. He has Aggrey House in London because he went through all of that. The Wesleyan School of Thought in London. Once he was, I'm going to tell you this, once he was traveling from the Gold Coast by sea, of course, in those days, no plane. And one day the captain called him. He said, Dr. Aggrey, I don't think you can go to the dining room anymore. He said, why? It's where the people said you cannot eat with them. It was all white passengers. He said, fine. Where you want me to eat? Or I will make sure we bring your food to your room. Also, that is fantastic. He said, that's what you do for princesses and kings in Africa. So I can stay in my room and let my servants come and serve me. I can start writing my book. And he made a joke out of it. That's the Aggrey. He makes joke out of some serious situation. He was the only black person on that on that ship. He stayed in his room until he got to New York. But he died very early. He's a young man. He was too ambitious. He wanted to change the whole world, and he actually killed him. He was sick one day. He took him to hospital in Harlem, the black side, and he didn't survive. His youngest son, Rudolph, he became U.S. ambassador and a lecturer at Howard University for many years before he died. He's married to a French lady. They have a daughter. I've connected with all of that when I was writing the biography. When it comes out, I'll let you know. W.E.B. Du Bois, my great lecturer. Du Bois can be viewed he can be viewed as one of the greatest intellectuals of the 20th century. I don't mean black intellectual, just intellectual in general. He was the very first black man to receive a PhD in history from Harvard. I'm going to look at his major contributions. He wrote his great book in 1903, The Souls of Black Folk, in which he discussed his philosophy. One of them is the theory of two-ness. Two-ness, T-W-O. You're an American. You're an African. How do you reconcile this? That's his two-ness. He said, but you have to. But don't you ever forget that you're an African and you're also an American. A lot of people don't like his theory. He also developed another theory. He said he studied the whole world, history. He studied sociology also with Max Weber that I mentioned last week, the great German thinker, sociologist. He said, I've never seen anywhere any revolution for change take place without the intellectual. There's some thought behind it. He said, so we must also have that if the black community is going to be successful. He calls that the talented tenth. The talented tenth. That was a very, very profound philosophy, theory. And I tried to follow that when I was training young men. I want the very best. And when I finish training you, I want you to go back, train somebody else. It has a multiple effect. A lot of people criticize him because they thought he was too elitist. Why you want to select the best 10% of the black race and train them to bring about change in society? Well, there's no effective leadership without knowledge. And that is the power of education. So, that was my man. I was very fortunate when I was at Howard. He came to give lecture in historiography. He and Rayford Logan, they were good friends. Rayford Logan, he was the secretary of the Pan-African movement. Oh, by the way, he was also the man who created the Niagara movement. He took 20 black folks to Niagara Falls to talk about the future of black people, which later on was merged into the NAACP. And Ida Wells and him, they were buddies when they established the NAACP, I believe in 1910 or 1909. So that's Du Bois. In Ghana, there's a library for him in Ghana. He was a personal friend of Kwame Nkrumah because he was speaking about the Pan-African movement, the creation of USA, United States of Africa, when Nkrumah met him in London. I think it was in Manchester in 1948. Yeah, that's Du Bois. He's one of the greatest intellectuals. Okada G. Woodson, a great educator. Woodson happens to be the second black person to get a PhD in history from Harvard. He's also a product of Harvard. Okay, that was Woodson. His greatest contribution was he studied very carefully. He left Harvard, and he never saw anything black in any textbook or anything. And the African history in America was never studied. They said African people have no history. Even the history of slavery didn't exist. They were just meant to become slaves. So he decided to react. In 1914, he created the Association for the Study of Negro History and Life and Culture, which was the first academy established in this country to study Black life, and is still in existence. We call him the father of Black history. He created the celebration of history. It used to be Black History Week. Then it became Black History Month. He is the founder. And there's a special place for him. His house in Washington, D.C. is now his historical site. If you go to D.C., go to Carter G. Woodson's place. And he wrote a lot of books, including one that you all should read. He calls it The Miseducation of the Negro. Miseducation of the Negro. He said, I stayed in Harvard. Took him more than 20 years before he discovered that he was miseducated at Harvard after a PhD in history. He said, because I never knew anything about myself, nothing about my people, how they struggled in the wars and everything else. So Black History Month should not be just a period of celebrating. It's a period of bringing all your research together and expose them. And he was hoping that by doing so, white folks will begin to understand that Black people are also part of the human race, and they help to make contribution towards American civilization. That was Woodson. So we call him part of Black history. Leroy Locke, in terms of real philosophy, he's probably the first Black man to receive a PhD in philosophy from UK. And he became professor at Howard University. He is the leading scholar in what we call the Harlem Renaissance. The leading scholar. I don't know if you know about the Harlem Renaissance. Was a period in American history where Black folks were saying, how about us? We are going to write about ourselves. It was art, it was literature, it was performance, it was music. It was just art, the arts. And he wrote this profound book. It's called The New Negro. People always ask me, what does he mean by that? What's new about the Negro? He was saying Harlem Renaissance is a different path to the past. The past, we were slaves, we were ignored, we were afraid, we fought, we did everything. But from now on, it's a new Renaissance. We are now the new Negro. We are going to fight and fight and fight for equal justice. It was very profound. And it was intellectual in the field of philosophy. I don't need to say anything about this guy. Martin Luther King, one of the leading activists in the civil rights business. It was first, we went to Morehouse College, HBCU in Atlanta, and became a pastor in a little church in, I think it was Bethel, in Montgomery, Alabama, before he moved to Atlanta to establish a church that gave him the rise to create the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which became a big instrument in fighting for freedom and justice for all. I was in graduate school at Howard, the march. Relatively new to this country, 63, but I was so excited to be at that march. And I tell everybody that's my last march. I ain't marching no more. 63. His profound speech, I Have a Dream. It went through the whole world. And people still talk about King, even today. Great contribution, not only to America, but to the human race. He also studied theology, by the way. Karanga. Not too much is known about this guy, but I think he has a great impact in the American psyche, in the American society. Karanga was rough. So rough that he was charged of harassing or abusing women, and he was sentenced to prison. He served a little time, he came back, went to school, got his degree in African American studies, something like that. And he started thinking his contribution to America. He created Kwanzaa. I don't know if you've heard of that word, Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is an African tradition where you celebrate a special period. All the harvest, everything has been done. We come together and cook and eat and dance. And he said, we should do something like that here. But it has to be between Christmas period. Let's say December 26th, after Christmas to the first week of January. A lot of people thought he was trying to say, we are going to replace Christian service or Christmas with Kwanzaa. No, that was not his thinking. It was just the period of the year when traditionally it happens in Africa that he wanted to transplant into the United States. So Kwanzaa was based upon 7 principles. 7 principles. Let me see if I can find them here. And those 7 principles is run 7 days from December to the other week, 7 days. And each principle is signified with candles, 7 candles that they are red and they have different meanings to different people. Some of you have attended some of those ceremonies. I'm sure you have. Let me see what I can get this out here for you. Kwanzaa. Oh, it's in my notes somewhere. Anyway, the 7 principles are all spelled out, and each time is done here, right here in Gainesville also. I know Cotton Club has done it. I've been there. It's a very nice ceremony. And they read each of those principles, both in English and in Swahili. It's reading in Swahili, okay? Okay. Huh? Yeah, they start with Umoja and end up with Queen Kajalika, end up with Nia, which is an Imani. So there are 7 principles. If you Google that, it will just come to you, so you will see them. It's a long story. The 7 principles itself is called Gansu Saba. Gansu Saba. That's the principle. Gansu Saba in Swahili, and the name is there. So let's say, for example, as Umoja. Umoja. You have a candle. Umoja means unity. It's emphasizing unity in Swahili. Umoja. Then you have Queen Shagaliga, self-determination and creative responsibility. Okay? Ujima, creativity, creative works of the community. It's all community-based, all these 7 principles. Umoja, creativity and economic development. And then you have Kumba. Kumba means purpose. What's your purpose? And then Nia, Imani, faith. So introduce this one into the American society. And it's very well practiced every year. Kwanzaa. So that is his contribution in terms of culture. Not his prison experience, but I think he's a professor now at one of the California universities. That's where he teaches. So he's very well promoted. He's still alive, still kicking. Bell Hooks. We're still talking about the African diaspora. What time do I have, Barbara? Oh my goodness. I gotta do that real quick. Bell Hooks, she is the seventh child, seven out of, you have 7 children. And she was the only girl. Born in Kentucky. What do you call the place? Berea? In Kentucky. That's where she was born. Very poor. The father was a janitor in the post office. The mother worked at home. And she looked at the society, the environment which was brought up. She started blaming herself. And she started questioning, why is this life like this? Right here in Kentucky. That's what drove her into the school of thought. Very well educated. Went to Berea University, Kentucky. I think he went to Stanford for a master's degree and a PhD somewhere. What's her major contribution? She was interested in one good thing, and that is the intersectionality of gender, race, and capitalism. She argues in her essays, these three have the capacity to continue to oppress people and keep them down. And that's what has happened to her parents and her environment. That was her philosophical thinking. The intersectionality between gender, race, and capitalism. He said they were inherently exploitative. And she wrote about it. She was also concerned about the women movement in America. He said, I believe in women movement. But your women movement does not include me because I'm black. And she once wrote an essay she called Anti-Woman. That's what Bell was. Anti-woman. She wrote many other essays and books. Relatively very young when she died. And they asked her, why are you saying you don't like men? He said, no, I like men. But the institution, what she calls patriarchy. Patriarchy means ruled by the husband or by the father. He said it was a political and social system to suppress women. He said, not because I hate men, I don't. He said, but that institution of patriarchy is not good for America. She has so many thoughts about justice and equality and womanhood in our society. Regrettably, she died without a child. That was Bells. That was not really her original name. This is the name of her grandmother's parents. Her real name was Gloria Jane Watkins. But she took this name and she writes it in that small letter. That's not a mistake of mine. This is the way she writes it. In lowercase, okay. This is the way, yeah. That's him. She became a professor at Berea University. In fact, there's an institute named after her in Kentucky after she passed. It's still there. Okay, is that the last we got? I want to share with this. Oh, she came to UF. Okay, yeah. I want to share this bibliography for you. Please try to, I didn't want to say that. This is it. Try to find a way to enrich your collections with some of these. And these have been wonderful thank you for attending. It's in this context I wanted to suggest something for you to consider, or for the Institute to consider. I want you to consider having an African study group at this institution. You have advantage of African Studies Center, African American Studies Center at the university. But there's no reason why you can't have a group here that wants to meet. I have met a lot of you who have been to Africa, and share your experiences. I help to promote the study of Africa because it's very critical to the global community. Africa has the largest natural resources that the world needs. Africa has the youngest population in terms of human power that the world needs. And I think it will be very useful for us to know more about that part of the world if you establish here an African studies study group or work group, and call me sometimes. I'll be glad to come and have lunch with you. Okay. Are there any questions? This is the end of the course. Please.
So, Bantu Stephen Biko, he's not considered a philosopher?
Biko? Yes. If you look at my original outline, Biko's name is there. But I just can't cover 30 of these people. Yeah, oh, Biko's name is there. Look at the list. There are many other names that are not there. I have selected these of what I consider to be greatest impact, not only in Africa, but worldwide as a thinker. Because thinking has no boundaries. It goes from Africa, it goes to somewhere in Italy or in Germany. That's thought. That's the way it goes. It's like air. And that's why I selected these key people in terms of their impact. Oh yeah, we can spend another 10 weeks to study many other great philosophers or younger ones. There are few young girls now who are not in philosophy in Africa, but they're still very, very few. Women in general, over the world, they are not really in philosophy, regrettably. It's still that kind of patriarchy society system that Bear is talking about. Men dominate because they think that the power of thinking, of leadership, is given by somebody to men only. I know when I went to University of Florida and University of Kansas to teach 1970, we had a lot of stories that women were not even allowed to pursue PhD in philosophy in that department. Things have changed since then. Black folks were not allowed to get PhD in clinical psychology when I went to the University of Kansas. This is the preeminent research university. But that's the way it is. But we are moving forward. Our founder has told us that we've got to move towards a more perfect union. It's a long ride, but we got to count our blessings. We are moving forward. And I'm hoping that after this election, we can continue to move forward. We can't go back.
Is there any other questions? No, there's nobody on Zoom either. Well, oh, hold on, I'll come back there.
I don't have a question. I've been watching from home. I've been doing a major project out at our church roof. We have a historical church. And I was listening to you all the way in until I got here. And I just wanted to be here in person to hear you talk, because I think a lot of times person hear the knowledge of what you're saying, but they don't hear the spirit and the wisdom of what comes from Africa and the people you're talking about. And I just wanted to just be here in person just to catch this last class. I would have come to the rest, but like I say, I'm in a historical church and we're putting a roof on, and I'm part of that. In fact, the main part of it. So I just wanted to tell you that I thought all of your lectures were quite stimulating, quite interesting, full of information that probably was heard and not heard. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, madam. I appreciate that. Yeah, I love Asha. I have some interns who are collecting data on the Black issues in Archer, in all of the counties, we are planning to have a bicentennial on December 7th, when the Florida Territorial Council established Alachua County in 1824. So it will be 200 years. And what we want to do with that symposium is to examine the contributions of Black folks into Alachua County. And we're going to go beyond that to look at what happened before Africans got here as Black Americans when the Indians were here for 12,000 years. So we have keynote speakers, and it's going to be published. Alachua County, yes, madam. On December 7th, there's going to be a symposium. This is sponsored by the Alachua County African and African American Historical Society, nonprofit. I organized it 2 years ago. Yes, no doubt about it. It's going to be at the Madison History Museum all day. It's a Saturday. Oh, yes, they are participants. They are co-sponsors. A lot of the speakers are going to be sponsored by Alachua County headquarters. We are going to talk about truth and reconciliation also. Yes, ma'am. It's Saturday. We are going to be sending them out. There will be a lot of publicity about it. I like to start very early. We are still in August. Yeah, it's going to be out. Okay. Thank you, madam. Appreciate being here. Hey there. Hey.